there, this is Professor Harvey. Welcome to the class. Our topic this week is virtualization, and I feel like there's a lot to say about virtualization and how it interacts with security and impacts organizations' cybersecurity posture that really isn't covered much in the exercise or in the other materials that go along. So I just wanted to give a couple of notes and even some personal experiences. One of the things that has always been an issue with organizations on security is control of just your inventory of your resources, knowing what you have. I'm an incident responder. I've been doing that for quite a long time. And when we get companies that have an incident that contact us, one of the first things we need to know is, how many hosts you have. Let's get software and get software pushed to your instances that we can use for analysis. Let's get data back. Let's get logs back from all of your various different hosts. And oftentimes companies are able to get the vast majority of their hosts, but there's often not a good complete handle on what they have. Even just asking for something like, can you give us network diagrams? Can you give us lists of hosts and that sort of thing? Companies are, if they're able to produce those at all, it's certainly not right away. They don't have those kind of things at their fingertips. Which is a shame, because really inventory is where security starts, right? The old saying is, if you're going to protect something, you have to know what are you protecting before you can really do anything effectively to protect it. So if you can't answer the question of what do you have, then how can you really start to protect it, and how can you really set out to protect it? So that's a key question that we always ask, and it's one that companies surprisingly still often can't give a very good, or at least certainly not a very quick answer to. What does that have to do with virtualization? Well, here's what it has to do with virtualization. One of the reasons why companies traditionally would have trouble with inventory and not knowing what all they have, especially on, say, the server side, is because of what we call sprawl. Right? Servers would get stood up for a project, for some sort of limited purpose, and just sort of left there, and sort of allowed to linger there for longer than they should. They weren't documented properly, especially if it was something that was like, oh, it's just for testing, oh, it's just for temporary, it was just for this special project. It's not expected to be a long-term production thing. The fact is, when stuff gets put in place temporarily often becomes kind of forever over time without anyone ever really intending it to. So server sprawl was always an issue in, that's the term we would use for it in organizations. With virtualization, it is so much easier to have that problem because unlike in the old days where you had to find equipment, you had to at least get your hands on a chassis, get your hands on a server in order to add a server. So there was an investment of time and money and resources that went into having that, and it had to sit in a rack somewhere. So it was difficult to have a server that was completely unknown. With virtualization, spinning up a new server, super easy to do. And so people will turn up new servers for everything, right? One of the great things about virtualization is it allows you to separate out everything and have one function per server, which is always what they told us we should be doing, but it was hard to do because of, again, the resources. It's hard to dedicate a whole server to just one simple function when that's a lot of hardware to throw at us one simple function. But with virtualization, it's much more practical to do that. But what goes along with that is just even more management problems in terms of that kind of sprawl that we were talking about. Even more issues where people don't know what they have, don't know where it is. Servers get turned up. It's so easy to do. So that's one thing. The other thing becomes dependency on virtualized infrastructure and its vulnerability that people don't always think of, because just like virtualization allows you to not be dependent on the hardware resources for each individual server, you are now dependent on that hypervisor layer. And if a threat actor, like a ransomware actor, can get into your hypervisor and actually log into the management layer of your virtualization solution, like VMware is the most common one we see probably 80% of the time. So that's ESXi, vCenter is the management side of that. If someone can get admin credentials and log in to your vCenter, log into your underlying ESXi hypervisors, they can destroy all of your virtual servers. And we have seen ransomware actors start to do that. Really about 1.5 years ago is when we first started seeing them do this. The first one doing it on a large scale was an adversary we call Spider, because their sort of signature software is called Pixie Rat. It's a Python-based remote access Trojan that they would use to gain and maintain access. And they would get in, and the thing that they were, as far as I know, really the first to do on a large scale was get into the ESXi servers. What they do is they just pause the virtual server and then encrypt the VMDK file, which is effectively the entire hard drive of that server, right? So on VMware, what would normally be a physical hard drive of a server is instead a single file with a .vmdk extension, and that file is the hard drive of that virtual system, and they would encrypt that file. So they encrypt that file, they've encrypted the entire server, and they would just have a script that would go in and pause all the servers and encrypt all of them. And so, you're talking about having a Fortune 500 company where we're getting emails from their CIO or their CISO from their Gmail accounts, because everything is encrypted and the whole place is shut down. They don't have access to email, they don't have access to anything. Everything is down. And then they have messages on some of their servers from this ransomware actor saying you need to pay us to get access to your stuff again. Even if you pay, it's so much work to try to restore all of that. And obviously we don't want anyone to pay those kind of ransoms, but unless you have a good backup solution and a good specifically for your virtualization layer, like a backup of those VMDK files that you can restore, and it needs to be one that's offline such that they aren't just going to be able to encrypt the backups, because that happens all too often, then the whole enterprise is just crippled. And so virtualization, which empowers a lot of advances in IT and has even made a lot of things easier and better in some ways from a security standpoint, also comes along with some real risk along with it that it adds. And so those are two areas, like I said, server sprawl, and then sort of the, I guess, all your eggs in one basket kind of effect, where if someone gets in there and encrypts that stuff, you lose everything all at once. And so you have all your vulnerability kind of concentrated in one place. And a lot of places just don't secure that properly. So those are two things I've seen in security where virtualization can actually add risk in some ways, in addition to sort of the things that it enables. So I'm interested especially for those of you who are in the IT business or already in the security industry, if you have any insights or ideas about virtualization and what the sort of pluses and minuses are of virtualization, or anything you've seen about good techniques for controlling the potential risks that virtualization brings with it. So look forward to some interesting discussion, and we'll talk to you soon.